Welcome, everybody, to the NFL show on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. I'm your host for the NFL show, Mike Goodpaster. Right now, I'd like to welcome in our NFL beat writer for the Grueling Truth, Sam Teets. How you doing, Sam?
I'm doing great, Mike. How about you?
I am always great. And today, we're going to continue our state of the franchise, and we're going to talk a little bit about the Seattle Seahawks. The Seahawks, of course, just added Jamal Adams, which we will get to in a minute. But when you look at the Seahawks, they're a team, because of Russell Wilson, are always a threat to make the playoffs and pretty much always do make the playoffs. So when you look at Seattle coming into this season, this is a team, to me, before we talk about them, look like they've really improved themselves.
Yeah, I like what the Seahawks have done this season. I mean, we obviously mentioned, I'll get to in a second, but I think they got a little bit better on the offensive line. So it has injuries last year. The O-line's always been a concern, even since Russell Wilson first got there. I think they got better there. I think they're still recovering some injuries in the backfield. I think they'll get a little bit better there even. And I think the secondary mainly is a huge area for improvement. I think the secondary is much better than what it was last year. And I expect the Seahawks have probably performed even better than they did last season.
Yeah, and when we look at them, we'll start from the top down, and we'll talk about Pete Carroll, who's a guy I don't think is necessarily a great football coach, but I think he is a guy that is a great motivator. It seems like guys really like to play for him.
Yeah, his team seems to really love him, but I do think there are times where that gets a little old. I think we saw it happen with the group of former players, guys like Marshall Lynch, Earl Thomas, Richard Sherman. It kind of got old for them, and they eventually had to change the character of the locker room a little bit, kind of move out and bring some new bodies in, because I think guys got tired of what Pete Carroll was selling them. But I think right now the current group is buying into what he's telling them. I think that's really good for them. I think they got a team that's cohesive right now and working towards one goal.
Yeah, and don't you think a little bit of that has to do with Pete Carroll reminds me more of a college coach than he does a professional coach, and I think that's kind of what wears on people after a while.
Yeah, I think after 5, 6, 7 years, then you kind of get to the point where you're tired a little bit of it. I think he is more of a college coach. I mean, it's kind of where guys start to begin with anyways. Really where a lot of people remember him from. I do think it's kind of a college coach mentality. I don't know if it will succeed. I don't know if it'll get back to a point where you're having sustained success in the NFL like you did early on. You kind of got lucky when you brought in all those guys in the Legion of Boom. So I don't know if he'll ever get back to that point, but I still think they got a Super Bowl window, and it's another 3 or 4 years probably where they could compete at a high level.
Well, it's hard to argue with a guy that's 159-1, been to a couple Super Bowls and won one. And I think really if you list the top coaches in the NFL, how many guys outside of Belichick, Reed, Peyton, Harbaugh would you really list in front of Carroll anyway?
I don't really know. I think you could make an argument at most to probably be towards the bottom of the top 10. You mentioned a bunch of guys, but I would take Doug Peters and I would take Mike Tomlin over him as well. I kind of pushed him towards that 8, somewhere between that 8 to like maybe 12 range, somewhere in that area in terms of where he ranks against the other great coaches in the league. I just personally don't see him as a top tier kind of guy. I don't think you do either.
I do. I really do. I mean, I think this. I mean, it's hard to argue with a guy that every year is in the playoffs. And I know he's got Russell Wilson, and that makes it easier. But I like to rip Pete Carroll. And the story that I remember is Joe Kelly, who's a friend of mine who played for over a decade in the NFL. He played for the Bengals on the Super Bowl team. He was a starter, but he went to the Jets. And Pete Carroll was one of the coaches. And he said Pete Carroll didn't have a clue what he was doing. So I think I'm sure he's learned something since then. But once again, I know some guys have left because he kind of wore on them, but it seems like he replaces guys that buy into what he wants to do. And when you have a coach that guys believe in, you're usually successful. Now, another big part of that reason, which we're going to talk about now, is Russell Wilson. And I think Russell Wilson is perhaps the most underappreciated quarterback in the NFL. I don't mean by the Seahawks management because he got a mega extension, but when people talk about Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes, I see it all the time on Facebook, Twitter, whatever. They all act like these guys are better than Russell Wilson. I think people forget Russell Wilson has been one of the best quarterbacks in the league for 7 years. He's been to 2 Super Bowls. He won 1 Super Bowl, and he's been taking teams that are under-talented to the playoffs the last few years. And, I mean, if they were to go into Green Bay and beat the Packers last year, I mean, you know what kind of rivalry the 49ers Seahawks are. The Seahawks would have put up a better fight, I think, than what the Packers did. And when you look at Russell Wilson, I think he's the best quarterback in the NFL right now.
I mean, you can make the argument. I think he's definitely one of the top three guys. I say personally he's number two at least. It's him and Mahomes for me. I'm still taking Mahomes a little bit because I've seen the more recent magic with him this past season, the last 2 years. But at the same point, I think if you're building a team and you want to win the Super Bowl immediately, I think Mahomes or Wilson, you could take either one of those guys and you'll immediately be in contention to win 10 games during the regular season and go out there and perform well in the playoffs just because that's who the guys are. And I mean, like you said, Wilson in the last 2 years has taken teams that are not playoff caliber teams and won 10 or 11 games with them.
Yeah, but my thing is this. I mean, you got Patrick Mahomes who's done it for 2 years. You got Russell Wilson who's done it for 7 years. I mean, that's a big difference to me. And, I mean, Wilson for 7 years has been one of the best quarterbacks. Patrick Mahomes for 2 years has. And I think this also. Russell Wilson would have probably won the last 2 Super Bowls with the talent the Kansas City Chiefs have. So I think when you compare the two in what they do, I think that Russell Wilson is a more complete quarterback. I think he's a lot better with his feet. And I think Mahomes is great with his feet. But, I mean, especially the quick passing to hit the hot routes, I think that's always been a little bit of Russell Wilson or Patrick Mahomes' issue. I assume that he will get that straightened out. And I think 3 or 4 years from now, I might be sitting here saying Patrick Mahomes is better than Russell Wilson. But from what I've seen right now, just the body of the work that they've had in the NFL, I think it is absolutely crazy to think that Patrick Mahomes is better than Russell Wilson right now, because we've seen guys in the past that were great quarterbacks for a couple years. And then they just kind of, level off or drop off. And when you look at that, I mean, that's why I'm taking Russell Wilson all the time, because I don't know that if you put Patrick Mahomes with the Seattle Seahawks of 2 years ago, that he gets them to the playoffs. I don't know if he has the ability to make everybody around him better. Now, he may, but the thing is this, with the guys he's got, those guys just have to be what they are for him, where Russell Wilson has to make everybody better to be able to get everything done.
Yeah, I agree with you in that case. I think guys like Tyler Lockett, Tyler Lockett's not to be cruel to any of his teammates, but Russell Wilson's made Tyler Lockett much better than what he is. Russell Wilson helped DK Metcalf really perform well this past season. Even guys like Chris Carson. Chris Carson's a good running back, but I don't know if he's a great running back. And I think that whole offense, I mean, having Russell Wilson is what makes that thing go. If you take Russell Wilson out and you plug in a guy who doesn't have the ability to improvise that he does, or the ability to stay calm and poised and just basically hit every route that Russell Wilson, because Russell Wilson can hit everything, and he can throw into small targets too. If you take Russell Wilson out of that offense, I don't know if you have another quarterback in the NFL who can go out there and win 10 to 11 games to that bad of an offensive line and that kind of messed up defense.
All right, so let's get to the Jamal Adams trade. Who won the trade, Sam? I mean, you've got 2 first-round picks, a third-round pick for Jamal Adams.
I think it's the Jets. I mean, honestly, Jamal Adams is a great player. Don't get me wrong, possibly the best safety in the NFL right now. But I think the Jets absolutely won this because 2 first-rounders for a safety, 2 first-rounders and a third-rounder, I believe, for a safety who said he didn't like the head coach. I don't like the head coach either, honestly. But the safety came out publicly and said, I don't like the head coach. He made a lot of noise. He tried to get out of New York. We kind of recognize that already. And he's still got 2 first-rounders and a third-rounder for him, along with a starting safety in return. So I feel like the Jets won this trade. The Seahawks basically did what I criticized the Rams for doing in the past. They gave up a lot of their future to get a star player right now. And now when they end up having to pay this guy down the line, they're not going to be able to do it.
Yeah, and when I look at this, Jamal Adams is a safety, and he's not Ronnie Lott. And if he's Ronnie Lott, or Ed Reed, maybe you can see doing this. But I don't think Jamal Adams is that. And the question is, was the problem Jamal Adams in New York? Was it Adam Gase? Now, the one thing I will say is I think Jamal Adams fits the Seattle Seahawks defense very well. And I think if any coach can maybe get through to him and get him on board with the entire team, it's a guy like Pete Carroll for the reasons I just suggested when I talked about what I thought of Carroll. So I think for Seattle, this will work out. But in the end, that's an awful lot to give up for a starting safety who I don't think Jamal Adams is going to be a Hall of Famer. I think he's a really good safety, and that's it. So I think this was nuts. I think that Seattle is more dangerous. If this makes sense, I think the Seahawks are more dangerous this year with Jamal Adams. But in the future, I think they would have been better off standing pat.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. So like I said, it's the same thing with the Rams. You basically mortgage your future to have a 1 or 2 year run here. And when it comes to if you don't capitalize, if you don't win a Super Bowl, really, was it worth it? Probably not. So to me, I think giving up 2 firsts and a third, along with a starting safety for a 2 firsts and a fourth, actually for a starting safety, it's just crazy to get Jamal Adams for that kind of price, especially when we see guys like who've been more talented players, possibly than Jamal Adams, get traded for less this summer. So giving up that much to get Jamal Adams, and I do get it does form a good safety because you got him, Quandre Diggs, Shaquille Griffin. It's a very good defensive backfield now with those guys. And that used to be a weak point for them. But at the same point, it's not Legion of Boom. You haven't made a new legendary defense when you did this. And you had to make it something like that if you're going to give up 2 firsts. You didn't do that. So to me, this is just a 1 year, 2 year rental type thing where you've basically traded your future away for a shot at making a deeper run in the playoffs.
So how imperative is it that they try to sign Jadeveon Clowney? And if they don't sign him, I mean, that affects everything here, especially to me, Jaron Reed, who I think really cashed in big last year with Clowney. I mean, and so when I look at this, I mean, I would think that you almost have to go out and get Clowney if you can make that happen now.
Yeah, the defensive front now is the huge issue for them because you basically address the secondary. You drafted a linebacker in the first round, so you're working on that. You already got Bobby Wagner and KJ Wright are still there. So I think the defensive front is the big issue. You got Puna Ford and Jaron Reed in the middle. I think that's fine. The issue is your defensive ends. You've got Bruce Irvin, who you brought in. You drafted LJ Collier last year. He didn't do anything as a rookie. I just think you need to get some kind of guy you know for certain is going to go out there and give you some kind of production against the run and against the pass. It's a question of how much money is Clowney asking for at this point. Because I don't think Seattle can afford to pay this guy $14 million a year. If he asks for, if you pay him 6 to 8, you can get it. But I don't
the
know
question is, does Clowney get desperate and take what he can get? Because right now it doesn't look like anything else is coming up. I'm sure something will as we get closer to camp. You look at him defensively, they drafted linebacker Jordan Brooks, defensive end Darrell Taylor with their first 2 picks in April's draft. But as you said, they still need some juice off the edge. I don't see him getting that. They had just 28 sacks last year, the fewest ever under Pete Carroll. So when we look at this, I think the team offensively has gotten better. Defensively, even with the Jamal Adams signing, I don't see where this front seven gets it done unless they get Clowney in. And, I mean, they're going to have an improved secondary, but it's going to have to be improved because they're going to have to cover for a lot longer, Sam.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like you say, I'd personally rather have a strong defensive line than have a strong secondary. That's just me personally. I'd rather have some pressure coming up front. And I think they don't have that right now. So you got Bruce Irvin's probably your best sack artist up there, and he just had career this past year. But there's no guarantee he's going to be able to come back and produce that. He's always been kind of inconsistent. So to me, if you can go out there and get Jadeveon Clowney and preferably do it for somewhere between $4 to $8 million for a year, that's what you want to do. You want to go out and get Jadeveon Clowney on a cheap deal, or Everson Griffin, get one of those 2 guys who you know are proven pass rushers, bring them in, and then you're suddenly looking much better. But right now, that defensive line is it's worrisome for Seattle.
Yeah, and the offensive line was an issue. It has been an issue for the last few years. They ranked in the bottom third according to Pro Football Focus. Now, the question is, have the Seahawks done enough in this offseason to address that problem? They didn't land a big-name free agent like a Jake Conklin. On the plus side, though, they did manage to retain Mike Upati, and they did raid the bargain bin for some guys they hope can help out. You know, they signed guys like Brandon Shell, B.J. Finney, Cedric Ogbuehi, who, for me, if you're signing Cedric Ogbuehi, you might as well just fold up your franchise. He was a first-round pick with the Bengals, and he's as bad as anybody I've seen in the NFL. They also got Chance Warmick. So I think out of all those guys, Shell is probably my favorite of all of them. He should be an upgrade at right tackle over Ifedi. But when you look at this, offensive line-wise, they're going to be better. But is that really saying a lot because they were so bad to begin with, Sam?
No, they're kicking the tires on a bunch of guys who are high former first and second round picks at this point. They're kicking the tires on the veterans. I don't think they're going to get much better, honestly. I really think they're a little bit better, but at the same point, I don't think it's a huge step forward for them. I do think drafting Damian Lewis from LSU, that was a really good pickup. You could have him potentially starting at one of the guard spots this year. And it's really going to help the running game out. I don't know if it's going to help the pass game out much because he's more of a run blocker, but I think it will help the run game out a little bit. And that's always what Seattle's done, though. They've kind of said, all right, Russell Wilson, you're going to have to scramble for your life here. We'll put some good run blockers out there for you. But other than that, I mean, it's all on you. It's kind of a similar situation that they have in Houston. They've got a left tackle, Laramie Tunsil, kind of like Seattle has left tackle and Dwayne Brown, and then absolutely nothing else. That's really what it is. They're leaving Russell Wilson out there to run for his life. And financially, it makes sense because you can't afford to pay everyone. You can't afford to pay a huge offensive line with some of the guys you have on your team. But at the same point, there's going to come a time in Russell Wilson's career where he can't do this anymore. They're going to have to start investing in the offensive line sooner or later.
Yeah, and the other guy I want to bring up real quick, because we talked about the front seven. I don't want to leave out Bobby Wagner, because Bobby Wagner is a guy who's been in the Pro Bowl the last 4 years, been a 5-time first-team All-Pro selection, not just Pro Bowl, 4 straight. I think this is a guy that gets kind of taken for granted, and I think Bobby Wagner, when he retires, should be in the NFL Hall of Fame.
Oh, I think he will be, absolutely. I think he's taking for granted. I think KJ Wright's a little overlooked, though KJ Wright's getting a little bit older, having more trouble in pass coverage this past year. But at the same point, Bobby Wagner has been the guy at the heart of that defense for so long, and he has been overlooked partially because of Russell Wilson and some of the guys who were in that secondary before him, like Earl Thomas, Richard Sherman. But I think you can make the argument Bobby Wagner is actually the most valuable member from that defense who's still around and playing in the NFL today. My question for him moving forward is he's already 30 years old. What will he ask him to do in terms of pass coverage, and how will he hold up moving forward? That's my main concern for them. I know they asked the linebackers to do a lot in pass coverage this past year. I'm interested to see if that will change and they kind of upgrade the secondary a little bit. And I'm just interested to see what they do move forward with Bobby Wagner and change his assignments up top possibly, because I think they're going to have to start the next 2 years planning for what they're going to do when he gets a little bit older and can't be as mobile.
All right, so I think another big question is the backfield hierarchy this season for the Seahawks. And it may not matter because it seems like every year they're one of the top rushing teams in the NFL. You had Rashad Penny, Chris Carson, C.J. Prosise. I've even heard rumors they might want Marshawn Lynch back. I don't know why, but I have heard rumors like that. What do you think they look like in the backfield?
Yeah, so Chris Carson had an injury last year. I think a fractured hip, I'm pretty sure, towards the end of the regular season. John Schneider said he is on track to start week 1. He's on track to be available at least week 1. So they fully expect to have Chris Carson for the entirety of the 2020 season. They brought in veteran backup and Carlos Hyde, who had arguably the best year of his career this past season. He ran for over 1,000 yards with Houston Texans. So now you got those two as your top 2 guys on your depth chart. I think Carson is still going to be your guy because he's run the system before. He's run well. I think Carlos Hyde is a very good backup for them at the same point, although he's a little bit too similar to Chris Carson for my liking in some ways. Not a great receiving back out of the backfield necessarily. Rashad Penny is fully expected to start on the PUP list, so I'll have to sit out. I think it's either the first 7 or 6 weeks of the season. He's not going to be available because he tore his ACL late in the regular season as well, so he's not going to be around. That leaves DJ Dallas and Travis Homer. I'm not sure if they're going to keep both those guys. One of them might end up on the practice squad. Probably Homer is going to be one of them. Both those guys are a little bit more versatile than Chris Carson and Carlos Hyde to come out of the backfield a little bit more. I do expect they'll use a 3 running back rotation, though. I expect all 3 guys, whoever the top 3 guys in their depth chart are going to be, will see carries early in the regular season.
All right, now we look at the wide receivers. I know everybody's pumped up about DK Metcalf, but the guy that I'm really excited about that I think is going to have a huge year is Will Dissly at tight end. And I think when your offensive line is not that great, your quarterback can move around a little bit. A guy like Dissly can make a huge impact. I think that he would be a legit, very good fantasy contributor if you're going to draft a fantasy team. I'm not, but I'm just saying if I was going to, that's what I would do. And he's in rehab right now. Will hopefully be ready for week 1. And then on top of that, you've got Greg Olsen, who's been productive in the last few years. He's been hurt off and on. But I think tight end is a position people really overlook with the Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah, for me right now, the 2 best tight end groups in the NFL are the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Seattle Seahawks right now. I think those 2 are head and shoulders above everyone else as far as I'm concerned. They got Will Dissly, who's a great run-blocking tight end, but he played a large role in the passing game last season when he was healthy. Unfortunately, he's only played 10 games for his first 2 seasons. I can't really trust him to stay healthy an entire year, which is why I think they've really upgraded that tight end position. They really are worried about his future. But if he's healthy, I mean, he's a dominant force, and Russell Wilson seems to have a good connection with him. This is a guy who could easily go for 60 yards a game if he's healthy. As for Greg Olsen, I'm not sure what his connection with Russell Wilson will be, but I assume it's going to work out fairly well just based on how he performed last season with Kyle Allen as a quarterback. I mean, if you can put up some decent numbers with Kyle Allen throwing you the ball, I'm sure you'll do just fine with Russell Wilson. And then in terms of depth, they got a lot of depth at tight end too. You got Luke Wilson, who's been there for years, kind of jumping on and off the roster, but they're really friendly with him. They like him a lot. Colby Parkinson is a rookie. He's going to miss part of the year, I think, because he injured himself in the offseason. But they like him too. He's a big guy. It looks to be like a red zone type target for them. And even Jacob Hollister is a smaller receiver type guy who they had playing tight end, put up some good numbers from last year when Will Disley was hurt. I think this is possibly the deepest tight end group in the entire NFL.
All right. So when we look at the Seahawks, I think this comes down between the Seahawks and the 49ers to win the division. The one thing there is, I mean, we watched, Seattle, I think, beat San Francisco once last year. Dang near got them twice. And when you look at this, do they have enough to get past the 49ers?
I mean, I think they do. And honestly, it comes down a little bit to the 49ers because I'm not entirely sure the Niners are going to be as good this year as they were last year. And if the Niners take even a little bit of a step back, I think the Seahawks can sneak past them easily. Another thing that comes down to the Seahawks sometimes have those letdown games. I can point to one almost every single year. The Seahawks go out there and lose to a team they shouldn't lose to. It happened once last year. Towards the end of the season, it's the second to last week, they lose to the Arizona Cardinals, and they should have won that game. So I think the issue with the Seattle Seahawks is they have games where they show up and they compete at a high level against almost all the competitive teams in the NFL, and they'll show up to a team they should beat, and they end up losing. That's my main concern about Seattle moving forward. But if they can eliminate that, they should win this division.
The thing that confuses me is this. The offensive line and defensive line advantages go to the 49ers. But the big difference here is Russell Wilson compared to Jimmy Garoppolo. I like Jimmy Garoppolo. I think he's in the top half of quarterbacks in the NFL, but I think Russell Wilson's even better than that. I think this is a team with the extra tight ends with DK Metcalf. I think you may see them throw the ball more this year. If they throw the ball more, I think Russell Wilson then has a good shot to possibly even be the MVP of the NFL. So I think Seattle is definitely a Super Bowl contender. I do worry about the front seven and the offensive line, though. So I have a hard time saying that I think they're going to be in the Super Bowl just because those are two huge issues that you usually don't win Super Bowls or get to Super Bowls if you have those issues. So with me, I'm thinking 11-5, either first and second in the division, maybe losing a divisional playoff round or the NFC Championship game to a team that is just more complete.
Yeah, I would give them, at most, if I'm being friendly, I'll give them 12-4. And I think they'll probably lose in the divisional round. I'll agree with you on that one. They'll probably get to the second round of the playoffs, and then they'll probably run to someone they just can't beat. There are more complete teams in the NFC. There are more complete teams in the NFL. I think that's the big issue for Seattle right now, is it comes down to clutch time. You're relying on Russell Wilson to carry this team so far. That's what I've seen from the last couple of years. I mean, the defense has had some pieces like Bobby Wagner. But at the same point, it's been Russell Wilson's team, and it's been him doing everything for the last 3 years. And until they can prove it otherwise to me, I'm still going to believe they're just solely relying on Russell Wilson to carry them once they hit the playoffs.
All right, Sam. Anything else we want to talk about NFL-wise today?
I think we covered most of it.
Well, hopefully the Miami Marlins don't shut down the NFL now because of everything that's happened.
I'm watching it this morning. I'm like, oh, here we go.
Yeah. So hopefully they don't cancel the season. But my Reds are 1-2, so they might as well shut it down because you know how fans are. Everybody's excited. They win the first game and they're going to the World Series and probably going 60-0. Lose the next two games and everybody's ready to pack it in. Yeah. But Sam, we're going to be back tomorrow at 1:00.
Yeah, sure. Let's do it.
I want to thank everybody that is listening right now. Make sure you go check out Sam Teets on Twitter. Sam, you want to tell everybody what your Twitter handle is?
Yeah, you can follow me at Sam_Teets33. I'm constantly posting new articles, stats, polls there, so feel free to go check that out.
All right, you can follow me at Grueling Truth. You could go to gruelingtruth.com to check out all of our articles, all of our podcasts. Our podcasts are on iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify. Wherever you find any kind of podcast, you'll find The Grueling Truth. And also, you can find our daily, or pretty much daily right now, NFL show. You can listen to it live on our Facebook group page, which I suggest you go give a follow there and a like. Or you can hear us on YouTube also. But for now, for Sam Teets, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.